Hello and welcome to the podcast of the Prison Officers Association, the UK's largest professional union for prison, correctional and secure psychiatric workers with over 33,000 members. In this special episode, National Chair Mark Fairhurst and General Secretary Steve Gillan talk about the circumstances that led to Circular 252 on overcrowding and the general election being issued right at the end of POA conference, and what happened as a result. They also talk about the relationship between the union and the most senior levels of HMPPS management, and how, on the issue of overcrowding in particular, there is a welcome recognition of the need to work collaboratively. Mark and Steve go on to discuss the importance of the general election and their plans for the period immediately following the result of it. So, Steve, Mark, the question of overcrowding has reared its ugly head again, and right at the end of POA conference, Circular 252 was issued. Why was that viewed as a necessary step at that time, given this is something of a circular argument that the union continues to have with government particularly?
Well, at the time, it came as a surprise to us that the government were in such a mess that our prisons, despite the 70-day release scheme, were in such a mess that our prisons were full at that time, and they would be full, despite the government dissolving itself because of the general election. They will be full by the end of June, beginning of July. So the indication was that there was a possibility that the Secretary of State for Justice, Alex Chalk, could decide that he was going to increase operational capacity, which would mean further overcrowd our prisons and making the working conditions for POA members intolerable and certainly breaching health and safety legislation. So myself and Steve decided that we had to act. And in acting, we made it plain and simple and clear to the Secretary of State that the red lines that the leaders of the service had maintained throughout this crisis would not be breached, and we would fully support them, because it's very easy to replace leaders of the service during a crisis and put in place a nodding dog who will agree to everything and put our members' health and safety at risk. So we hurriedly drafted a circular to get it out straight away, demanding an emergency meeting with Alex Chalk so we could reiterate our support for the leaders of the service who would maintain those red lines, and reiterate that we would take action. And the first part of that action would be a legal challenge. The second part I'm not really going to go into, apart from saying the safety of POA members at work is paramount, it's non-negotiable, and we would use health and safety legislation to protect them in the workplace. We do that no matter what. So that was our stance.
I think anyone listening to this, Mark, would understand exactly the concerns you've expressed and also the way forward that you've described. Steve, the circular acknowledged that the general election had just been called at the time the circular was issued. There's obviously an issue about decisions being taken during a period of purdah when government is in effect not sitting. But what is the reaction of the union to the general election campaign?
We were quite surprised the general election was called for the 4th of July. I think everyone was expecting it later in the year. And Mark's quite right to highlight why we hurriedly put that press release together, because whilst they're doing all the campaigning during purdah and Parliament ceases and different things, it was imperative that we stamped our authority as well as a trade union to demonstrate to our members that we know that there's a prison crisis out there. Everybody knows it's a prison crisis. And the reality is that prison crisis doesn't stop just because there's a general election. So whatever government is elected on the 4th of July, whether it's an outright Labour government, whether it's a return of the Tories again, or whether it's a hung parliament, and the prison crisis is still going to be there. So it really is quite significant in reality to this. And that's why we wanted an urgent meeting with the Secretary of State, Alex Chalk, because ministers, although Parliament is dissolved, Secretaries of State are still there for issues such as this. And credit to Alex Chalk and the Prisons Minister. We put that circular out on Thursday, sent a letter saying we wanted an urgent meeting, and they met with Mark and I the following day on Friday at 5:30. So we put across our concerns, and credit to him. He conceded that he will not breach the operational capacity because we were polite, but we were forthright, both myself and Mark, that if they did, then we would mount an immediate legal challenge and we would rely on health and safety legislation to protect our members. So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter to me who's returned into government, because we're political parties neutral. The crisis is still going to be there, and there's going to be real difficult decisions for whoever forms the next government. Make no mistake about that.
What would the union like to see if there is a Labour government, or irrespective, you could say, of whatever party of government is returned on the 4th of July? What are the key messages? Because, as you say, credit to the current prison ministers, but the prison population is still going to go up. There's still going to be a problem. What would the discussion on the 5th of July consist of from the POA side?
Well, we did them on several fronts, wouldn't we? Steve's always mentioning, it was actually pledged by the Tory party that we want a Royal Commission. That's not going away. We're demanding a Royal Commission for all the right reasons, because the entire criminal justice sector is in a right old mess. I mean, you've got this government that were in power. They tried to promote themselves as the government of law and order, when in actual fact, even the most ardent Tory supporter listening to this would have to agree they are the government of crisis and chaos. So we would ask for a Royal Commission first and foremost. We'd be looking at what you're going to do about sentencing policy, because if you bang people up for longer and incarcerate more people, you need more prison spaces. Prison spaces don't come quick. So you need to look at sentencing policy. What can we do to reduce short sentences even further and give the public confidence that robust community sentences will work? You need to increase our workforce, increase our pay, lower our retirement age. You need to increase the workforce for probation, because they're overworked and overstretched, understaffed. There's a whole host of things that we'll discuss with the new government, but the main points are what you're going to do in the immediate to reduce capacity, and long-term Royal Commission, and all the asks that we've always asked for, which is decent pay, safety at work, a lower retirement age. Are you going to follow Scotland's lead if you are a Labour government? And are you going to return prisons to the public sector like they've done in Scotland? All these things are open for discussion, but I'm sure Steve will expand, because he's met with Keir Starmer twice. So, we are chipping away.
Indeed. And Steve, what would the advice you would give the new government on overcrowding in particular?
Conference have set out, as per Conference Paper 3, our strategic aims and objectives from 2024 to 2029, which is effectively a 5-year plan. Mark's touched on some of those issues, but our bullet points were absolutely clear, and that is to increase our pay terms and conditions, to break the link between state pension age and retirement age, improve staffing levels, training and professionalisation, to reduce violence in the workplace with clear health and safety policies, to campaign for a Royal Commission into prisons and the whole criminal justice system, and to restore the right to strike for prison officers who currently do not have it. People that's done in England, Wales and Northern Ireland. But if it's a Labour government, and with 14 years of misery, which I hope no POA member forgets, with a cost of living crisis, with getting rid of all the experienced staff, overcrowding, unbearable working conditions because of that overcrowding, assault increasing. At some stage, even if it is a Labour government, we don't know who the Secretary of State is going to be, because they tend to do reshuffles and different things. So On the 5th of July, I think Mark and myself will be very, very, very busy taking meetings with whoever is announced, because we want to talk to them about those strategic aims and objectives. But we also need, as well, as Mark has just said, something in place, not just short term, but long term, because the criminal justice system is broken, not just in prisons, but in our court, policing, and it has that knock-on effect. So you can't just fix one without fixing everything else. Whoever forms the government, from day one, they're going to have to hit the ground running, and they're going to have to prioritise things. Now, I know that prisons aren't sexy for anybody in comparison to education, in comparison to the NHS and different things, but they are vitally important. And it's not worth just chucking money down a drain continually to try and fix a revolving door. That just isn't going to wash. And we've got to have those sensible discussions, sensible outcomes that protect our members and meet our strategic aims and objectives.
In seeking that situation, Steve and Mark, do you take some heart from the fact that Phil Coppell and Amy Rees, as the two most senior managers in HMPPS, are actually seem to be on the same page as the union when it comes to overcrowding, and there's the opportunity for a kind of strategic relationship there that perhaps hasn't always been the case?
Yeah, I think they are on the same page, and everybody's on the same page who works in prisons when it comes to not breaching operational capacity, because it makes our working conditions even more unsafe. But they're also on the same page with our retirement age. They think we should have a retirement age of 60. So we do have common ground on many issues. And that is heartening. It's heartening that we've got positive industrial relations. Don't get me wrong. We still have major disagreements, and we still have legal challenges that we'd like to implement should they try and impose certain aspects of our role on us. So you've got to bear that in mind. We are a trade union and we act like a trade union, but it is heartening, and it is good that we are on the same page with these difficult issues. But, on the 5th of July, Steve's quite right. We are going to be busy, because on the 5th of July, I can guarantee the general public, our jails will be full. We'll be clogging up police cells again, and chief constables will probably be telling everybody to postpone operations and not to arrest people. So what's the new government going to do on the 5th of July? Because something will have to be imposed. Something will have to change. Where are we going to lock people up?
Just to follow that, I mean, Mark's absolutely correct. I don't expect, if it is a Labour government, that on day one that there'll be any massive changes, because they haven't got a magic wand. But we'll be there as the trade union who are consistently here, advising, cajoling them along. We're not just going to settle for us to be ignored, and we will be forceful about it. And I'm sure our employer will be forceful about it, because as you've just identified, it is quite refreshing. Me and Mark have been around a long time, to be honest with you. I can't remember, don't get me wrong, there are teething problems at local level with local committees where some governors just won't play ball. But I've found the hierarchy, Phil Coppell and Amy Rees, really quite refreshing in their outlook. As Mark says, yeah, we have our disagreements. We don't always agree with them. They don't always agree with us. But we are professional towards each other. And I think there's not a fag paper between us on this. There might be a little bit of distance on continuing to operate at an operational capacity, because we actually believe it should be the certified normal accommodation as identified by Lord Woolf after the Strangeways riot. We don't think we should ever be working actually at operational capacity, because it's dangerous, as we're now seeing by doing so. But we're not going to want to breach those operational capacities. So Labour will, if they form the next government, have real difficult decisions. And the only way they can do that is by listening to this trade union, who, let's face it, politicians come and go, but we are the constant.
Mark, any final thoughts?
I mean, we're hidden behind a grey wall. Prisons are not vote winners. We are the forgotten service in many people's eyes. And my thoughts are, we want a service that everybody can be proud of, a service that tries their best to rehabilitate prisoners, that staff are proud to work for, where they're not worried about going into work and coming home covered in blood or ending up in accident and emergency. That's the type of service we want. But to do that, you have to, when you come into power as a government, you have to invest heavily in our prisons. You have to increase staff wages. You have to lower our retirement age. You have to improve safety. But more importantly, you have to invest heavily so every prisoner we lock up has the opportunity to access a work or education space so we can increase their chances of gaining employment when they're released. At least give them hope. That and all the support services that surround it, healthcare, deal with addictions, invest in mental health services in our communities so a lot of people with severe mental health disorders in prisons can transfer to somewhere more conducive with their needs, because we've got no training in mental health and we've got a lot of people with acute mental health conditions in prisons. And part of the Royal Commission will highlight all this. Maybe that's why governments have avoided it. But we need to heavily invest in our prisons. And more importantly, you need to listen to the people who are the voice of the front line, and that's the POA. The only union any frontline member of staff in the prison service needs to join is the POA, because we know what we're talking about. We've been here a long time and we're not going anywhere.
Steve, Mark, thank you both very much indeed. My thanks to National Chair Mark Fairhurst and General Secretary Steve Gillan. You can keep up to speed on the latest developments on the overcrowding issue and the union's key policy asks of government by visiting the union's website at poauk.org.uk, as well as from your local POA representative. And if you are not yet a POA member, all the information you need is also on the website and available from local officials. Thank you for listening. We hope you have liked what you have heard and will join us for the next episode of the POA podcast. Thank you and goodbye.